Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! Happy Hanukkah! Festive Kwanzaa! Wonderful winter solstice! Ramadan? Let's have some fun!
Ooh. Ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 12 Nights of Christmas. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
Hello, this is Sarah Mertz. I work at Eventbrite, and you are listening to Promoter 101.
Wicca, 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 wicca. Wow. Happy New Year's, friends. It's Promoter 101, and this is the last day of our 12 Days of Christmas Spectacular. We've come straight through 12 days, 12 new interviews. I'm Dan Steinberg and ready to unveil our last featured interview. Give it up for Luke Pierce.
Dan, so good to be here on the final day. That's the 12th day of Christmas. It's New Year's Eve on Promoter 101. This is the final of 12 consecutive podcasts where Dan and I have brought you an abridged version of Promoter 101. Quick hits and one featured interview of a guest that you've never heard before on Promoter 101. We're going to be resuming our weekly schedule of regular Promoter 101s, the news, the tweets, the whole thing. More interviews for you starting next week. But for today, we've got a featured guest from UTA, that's United Talent Agency's Tim Borror, here to talk about life, booking some of the coolest acts on the road, from his days as an Indy Agent in Philly to working at a major New York City agency in UTA.
Hi, this is Heath Miller.
Becca Leifer.
Ed Mike Cohn.
Derek Dimmenstein.
Jason Kupperman.
Jason Miller.
John Scher.
Marcia Vlasic.
Mike Fruitman. Ricardo Bacco.
Peter Schwartz.
Nick Storch.
I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
I'm on Promoter 101.
We continue our world tour. Catch us when we come to a town near you.
Next on deck for Promoter 101, we'll be live at the FlyCon conference in the Big Easy, New Orleans, January 16th at 2 p.m. We'll be recording Promoter 101 live with a special guest from Locken and the Brooklyn Bowl, Mr. Peter Shapiro. Looking forward to it, Dan.
Yeah, and you can follow us on Twitter. I'm at The Jew. The show's at Promoters 101, and it's plural, Promoters with an S, 101. And you can always catch Luke at W. Luke Pierce.
Of course, it's Dan and I talking every week. You hear enough of us, but it doesn't have to be that way. We're ready to listen. Send us an email with your ideas to steiny@promoter101.net. We can't wait to hear what's on your mind, and we give you our sworn promise to respond to every inquiry in a timely manner because you matter to us.
Hey, Steve Littman. Steve Littman presents in St. Louis on Promoter 101.
Today on Promoter 101, it's the final, the 12th interview on the 12 Days of Christmas. We're going to be featuring UTA's Tim Borror, who's here to talk about his life. He's been booking some of the coolest acts out on the road, but he started as an Indy agent in Philly and worked his way up to the offices of a major New York agency at UTA. Welcome to the podcast, Tim.
Promoter 101, we're in New York hanging out with an old friend. Tim Borror, thank you so much for making time.
Good to be here, man.
You represent a big part of the market that I think gets less than its share of attention. The rock world, and the harder rock world at that, does solid business constantly, more tours out, packing the clubs and the ballrooms. It really is one of the better genres to see growth in revenue in constantly.
Well, yeah, I've been lucky to be a part of that for a long time, but I don't know that these bands ever get totally in style. So they never go out of style. Seems like they kind of waver in and out a little bit on different ends of the crest. The fans are loyal. It's a lifestyle. And there is some passing of the torch sometimes with the elder statesman bands to the younger bands. And as a result, we get the opportunity to kind of keep the thing going.
And it's always great F&B, so the venues always want you back.
They like their beer, that's for sure.
Yeah, mostly the B in the F&B.
Yeah, right, exactly.
The merch numbers on these shows are always good. It's always a black t-shirt, but they still sell. It's like one of these days, they're going to break through with a beige t-shirt or something. It's going to happen. Now, let's talk about your roster right now. Who are you handling that you're super excited about?
I'm always having a super good time, a lot of fun with Clutch. They're a band that they've been together since the early 90s. I actually booked them as a promoter in Philadelphia for their first time playing that market, and have had business with them on the agent side a few years after. And, we kind of taken this band from a couple hundred people and couple $1,000 guarantees up to the sky's the limit, and they continue to grow and they're getting great looks.
It seems like they're on pace that they could turn into Tool in not too long of a future. Like there's an arena business there as a headliner for them in the near future.
That would be great if it got to that level of success. It's been a slow burn, but it's been a grind upwards. Every time they put out a record, every time they do a tour, they seem to do a little bit better than the last time. And they're becoming definitely a band's band. They're becoming a promoter's band.
The love for them amongst people in the industry and the fans aren't contained to just people that like hard rock.
Yep, sure.
They're musicians first and foremost.
Yep. They're one of the few bands that it's the same original 4 members as when they started way back when. You don't see a lot of bands figuring out how to survive the traveling small cylinder around the globe for years and years at a time and still feel like there's love in the room and they want to keep going with each other. So, those guys have a lot to be proud of, and I've been proud to be part of it.
You guys have done a great job of packaging them, too. I think that the different looks that you've taken with them paid off. They were good moves, and I think that helps build the band.
Like I said, they're a band's band. They're hard rock, but it's a splash of ZZ Top boogie in there, and they definitely tend to get jammy from time to time. But at the end of the day, there isn't a modern classic rock genre, so to speak, but if there were, they would be at the top of the page, I think.
Are you still commuting back and forth between Philadelphia and New York?
Yes, I am. It's not daily. I've got an apartment here in the city. I've got a home in South Jersey right across one of the bridges outside of Philadelphia. It's an exhausting lifestyle sometimes. It's hard to keep track of your life, but at the same token, it's fun in the sense I come up here in New York and hang with my colleagues and do all the stuff that you're supposed to do as a music business professional and take, New York City for everything that it's worth, the food, the shows, the pace, and then I go home and decompress for a couple of days and come back and do it again.
Well, that's an amazing thing. I mean, when you came to the agency group, you were working with guys like Steve Martin that were willing to cut flexible deal like that, where you were able to make that work.
I think UTA likes to be in the office more than the agency group did, which is fine. I've made the adjustment and it's still working for me and it's working for them. And the work's all still getting done and I'm getting a little more FaceTime with my colleagues. So right now it's good too.
Let's talk about how life has changed since you went from the agency group and that became UTA.
We went from kind of being 20 different little islands to one roster, everybody for one agenda, trying to make everyone's business stronger. There's more interaction between the music agents and the music division than there was before, but it's also a different interaction.
How so?
Like I said, I think, when you go from being maybe a little more linear where you're just kind of focused on your own roster fully to having to take a step back and look at the business from a broader angle, and how can you make a bigger difference for the company and the other artists, but also use everyone else's relationships and mind power and everything else. I mean, it's, after being in this business for 25 years or however long I've been doing it, it's exciting to be put in a position where you can reimagine the business and take the ceiling off a little bit and be like, oh, wait, there's a whole another gear to get into here, and then there's the full service end of the company. So, and trying to figure out and learn about that end of the business and how we can all plug into that. And
so you can do everything in-house. You don't have to send your artists across town if they want to start acting or they want to get deeper into branding.
Or if they just have a creative idea in general that's just outside of book me a tour. And why shouldn't they? As they grow, they get more leverage. They see new potential, not only within who they are, but what the business can offer them. And, it's great to be at a place now where you can help them take those shots and develop ideas.
I could see that actually being an amazingly great thing for Clutch moving into these bigger years as they're coming into. Is there's a lot of brands that would want to line up with their coolness.
We helped Randy from Lamb of God with a book. We've helped Danzig with a bunch of things that are outside of music. There's so many success stories within the music space on how the other departments have helped. It's interesting for me because my artists are generally anti-culture bands. They're not always the most brand friendly, sponsorship friendly, whatever, but it's still great to have a company that can help support those things for even those artists when we need to.
So Danzig got back together last year with the Misfits and did the Riot Fests. We would have thought that would have been the first of many dates, and you would have assumed a tour would have come, and that wasn't the thing. Is that something that may be in the works at some point, or do you think that was one and done? Because the response was amazing. Like, people loved it.
Amazing, and they were amazing. I mean, they over-delivered. They were as good at being the Misfits as you could have hoped them to have been. And I would say both shows were equally great. Chicago was the bigger of the two, and they certainly brought in maybe some of the show was worked out a little bit better or more refined than the first one, having done one in Denver, but they were both great shows. And I'd love to see them do as much as they want to do, and we'll help them do as much as they want to do. That was a highlight for sure. And hopefully there'll be a few more highlights.
Yeah, I think a few more of us would have been on an airplane said we realized they weren't going to 2 or 3 months later. We just assumed at some point that was going to happen, man. It was
I'll tell you what, man, Michael, just to give him a moment about it, I mean, he's a big reason it was able to happen. He's got a real good relationship with Glenn. And, I think to that extent, for what kind of festival they are, which at this point is an A-plus level festival that's as good as anybody else's festival, they just really do a good job of understanding the artists that they have playing as well as the audience they have coming and figuring it out for them every year. So it was cool to do it with him.
You were talking about A-plus festival. I've heard that from other agents before, though, that the agencies use that. And I'm not sure. I was kind of curious if there was an official conversation that you guys all share, if everybody just has their own understanding of, okay, they've been around long enough. They've always pulled it off. They've never fucked anyone. Because Michael's name is gold standard. Michael's loved by everyone. He pays his acts. He treats them well. His festivals come off.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. I think you talk sheer gross attendance, budget, ability to execute, the way that things run, the way you feel when you're there, especially on the artist side.
And they've had problems in the past. Like Denver had some big problems with the dates played.
Well, I mean, look, I think, that's all part of the growth of anyone doing these things. But, when you figure out how to push through problems and still deliver and still make something grow, you eventually are an A-plus. It's the nature of what we're all looking to do.
You and me were talking about experimenting with our production and paying attention to, because I had done a lot of rock coming up and figuring it out. But it seemed like bands that break get to a point where the production gets over the people that normally do that stuff that know how to find the fans. And that seems like that's a constant challenge as your bands get bigger and explode. How do you keep the guys that know how to find your fans involved when they go to that next level, because they need those bigger production rooms and shows?
Hopefully that problem's always going to exist, because that means that there's still competent, strong-willed indie promoters out there that can help a band get off the ground. And I think some of those promoters will never figure out how to grow to the next level and be able to produce that show when the time comes, even though maybe they're a vital part of getting it there. But on the other hand, plenty of those guys have, and they will, the ones that are maybe younger now and still growing. So many of them figure it out and either, move on to the next step and take a job with somebody else, or figure out how to continue to make their own thing grow. And luckily, I think we were having that conversation years ago. You and I were both kind of making the shift from having been trying to figure it out for a period of time to starting to actually have it figured out. And a lot of the people that I was working with at that time, who were indie promoters that were on that ride with me, also figured it out for themselves and moved on, and were able to continue to be great street level promoters and relatable to in that way. But we're also in one way or another able to figure out how to, make the shift and produce great shows. And look, some of them bit the dust. Some of them haven't survived at all. And some of them continued to survive at whatever level that may have been early on. And they're, they can still play a role and have a career. And any of this that we're all doing, whether the band becomes a stadium band or whether they're still slugging it out in clubs 20 years later, all of it's better than working at 7-Eleven.
Are there some agents that are coming up that you're thinking these guys have got a bright future that you're excited about?
We've got a number of guys in-house that I think are great players. Ryan Soroka came and joined us last year or 2 years ago. He's amazing. Matt Anderson's amazing. Chad. I would say all of our guys and girls in the territorial system on the music side at UTA, I just think so many of them are really good players. And it's a little self-serving to say that, but on the other hand, so many of them have kind of come from a similar background to me in the sense that they self-started. They figured out how to do a lot of it on their own before they needed help. And when you get to the point where you need help, you need it, so you're willing to take it. So it's kind of a special kind of person, I think, in that regard, that's able to do a level of self-starting and develop a career and move a career up the ladder to a certain level, to the point where now you can get a little help and you're actually able to take it and then take it further. It's harder to be indie, I think, on any side of it than it used to be. There's still a need for the independent promoter to exist, anywhere that spirit exists, really. I think Royer McCoy in the Southeast, he's good at what he's doing. I don't know if you consider them independent or not, but I think Knitting Factory does great at what they do. You do what you do. It's great. Evancho, again, another big company, but they're not national in the same way that they're competing.
But they own their market like no one has since Bill Graham. They have the arena, they have the festival, they have the clubs, they have the theaters. Besides comedy, which is just for laughs in that market, and because they happen to be the comedy fest with the TV show, they're able to compete and own that market there. But besides that, they own everything top to bottom in that market the way Bill Graham owned San Francisco when he was there.
And look, I think the reality is, when we're booking a tour, we get an offer from AG and we get an offer from Live Nation, but the best way to keep the market honest is to make sure that you know who all those indie promoters are. And city to city, I don't want to say definitively there's one in every city, but in most cities there's one, there's 5, they're there. And we get offers from all of them. And they're getting shows. So did our guys in Dallas and in Denver, or in Colorado at large. I mean, those guys definitely help keep the playing field level.
Let's talk about Danny Wimmer Presents. The festival circuit that he has built is amazing, and if you get offers from him for half of his festivals alone, that's a huge boost for an artist's career and enough to route around.
The one-off festival didn't exist in the same way in North America.
The way it does in the UK?
Yeah, or in Europe at large, the way it's starting to now, and Danny's not the only one. I think Danny is the one guy in our genre that is, at this point, he's got a dozen plus around the country during 2 or 3 different times of the year. And he's definitely kind of stepped out and, really put a flag down for it. And he's championing rock. He's not following the trends in that regard. He's kind of taking notice to how you and I started this conversation, which is the stuff is always here and it always does a certain level of business. And there's a lot of diversity within the rock genre that you can have some pretty dynamic bills. I think, Danny started off in kind of being in a lane, but you can see now that the bills are starting to get a slightly more eclectic. And I think hopefully it'll continue to build, and that's good for rock. You don't want to listen to one thing all the time,
What are the things that promoters do that get under your skin that you're like, you know what, this can't happen. This is not shit you should be doing if you want to be doing my acts. What are your pet peeves?
Chasing people for contracts and deposits. It's like, we all know what this business is. You get the contracts 4 months in advance. Why are we talking about this 3 days before the show?
Right, especially because most agencies will let you send the deposit 2 weeks out, so you can turn the paper right around if you're even having a cash flow problem.
Why is everyone surprised that this is like something that needs to happen this late into the program? That's probably on a superficial level. That's one of the things. Waiting till the last minute to start worrying about a show. Look, I think that's probably on both sides to an extent. It's like I may know a show is stalling and not be any more thrilled to talk about it than the promoter, but by the time it gets brought up sometimes on either end, it's too late. Now we're just living through an issue.
What's the right time to bring that up?
At least time for everybody to get comfortable with the problem being what the problem's going to be, rather than it being you're fucking me conversation either way in the 11th hour.
It seems like that's the thing. You check in early when the ticket count's a week old. It's like, okay, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Is this performing like everything else, right? Like, that's the fair conversation to have. Just checking in, tapping you on the shoulder. It's like, I'm paying attention because I thought maybe this would have come out stronger.
That's it. The constant checking in, especially when you gut checked it early and it's maybe a little off, you got to stay talking about it. There's so much, getting the management and the band engaged early on that stuff, the label, publicists involved when you got a slow show early just helps it. There's so many ways to market a show now that we didn't have before. And a lot of times you can just keep adding, something in. And look, sometimes you can't save a show. That's a reality, but all those other conversations that we all don't want to have with each other, for better or for worse, are much easier to be had once we beat the thing up all along the way. We all know we threw the sink at it. You knew early that I wasn't going to be able to help, or at the end, or you knew early that maybe I would be able to help at the end. All of that stuff is just a lot easier when we're actually paying attention to these shows that we're putting on sale rather than just treating them like a show count.
Can you give some advice to younger agents and promoters coming up on what to do to build a business successfully as you have?
I think being humble and trying to over deliver without over promising and falling short, being about your word and trying not to hurt people in this business will get you a lot of support and help you grow your business as you go. You will keep people on your side if you're doing those things, even when you don't have the reach or you don't have the leverage. If you're being real, if you're being, legit to the extent that you can control what you've got going on, you're going to continue to get support. And to me, that was always an important building block of what I was doing that I still make a big part of my day to day. And it's always worked. All the other stuff, having good ears, being at the right place at the right time, all of that is, that's the special sauce that those of us who are having some success have been lucky to also have on our side. But the basics are, grind hard.
And you're always going to fight for the guy that you believe is grinding hard for you, right? Those are the guys that you're going to go to with your business first because you want to see that every time.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking time and being on Promoter 101.
Man. A lot of fun. Thank you very much.
The great Tim Borror. Tim may be one of the most tattooed motherfuckers we've ever had on this podcast. He is like 6'5" and intimidating as hell to meet in a dark alley in Philly. But in all actuality, he's one of the nicest, sweetest guys in the business. He's one of the coolest cats, and he books some of the coolest acts in the world, so it's fitting as he is possibly the coolest agent I know in the game. Mr. Tim Borror, thanks for being here.
Hi, this is Nick Gold from Entertainment Travel, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Hey, if you want to reach out to us, send us an email to steiny@promoter101.net. Let us know who you want to see on the podcast. Let us know who you thought was terrible on the podcast. Let us know that you thought we sucked on the podcast.
You can actually keep those thoughts to yourself. I'm really not interested in any sort of constructive criticism. This is a labor of love for Dan and I. So if you're out there correcting our grammar, you can literally go fuck yourself. But no, in all seriousness, thanks to everybody that's been listening to Promoter 101 during these 12 days of Christmas. Thank you to all of our amazing guests. If you missed us, full news, tweets, everything, we're going to be kicking it back up January 5th. With episode 64 of Promoter 101 with Feld Entertainment CEOs Kenneth Feld, data specialist, Core Software's Scott Aller, and a war story from APA's Craig Newman.
Until then, we want to thank you all for listening, wishing you the happiest of New Year's. My resolution for all of you is to stop listening to so many fucking podcasts.
Safe time out there tonight, and a very happy New Year's.
Hey, don't drink and settle, everybody. Cheers.
This is Dave Brooks with Amplify Media on Promoter 101.